I guess I come at a new place first as a naturalist. It's the old adventurer in me that was there when I was 17 years old, of hoping to see perhaps a peregrine come diving in, scare up a whole bunch of the gulls or something like that. But once that gets going, then the whole thing is a mix. The artist and the naturalist just kind of go along together in a general sort of hodgepodge. I've always considered myself a field person. I guess from the time I was a teenager, I considered it was a much more vigorous, strong, bold thing to do, to get out in the field, and it didn't matter what the weather was, and hike long distances and climb big trees and really get in there and see stuff. And so that was one element of it. Also, I think seeing the actual creatures in the field is I think the place where you get your ideas. If all you do is look through books or look at photographs or something of that sort, it doesn't have the dynamic potential of all the different possibilities that the real world can offer. And not only do I think being a field naturalist is important, I think being a field artist is important, because the phase that I went through of Impressionism and then Group of Seven kind of stuff, I made it a point of honor to finish everything while I was in the field, and there was some essence to being in the field and feeling the wind blow through your hair and the wet, lumpy rock on pushing up against your bottom and that kind of thing, listening to the sound of the waves, that translated itself into some of the essence of the picture. I just think being in the field and exploring the field is part of both my art and my nature. One that I saw in the field that just immediately grabbed me was the penguin and whale bones. And as soon as I saw this scene, I said, that one is for me, and I sat right down on this hunk of whale vertebrae, which is just exactly the same shape and size as a toilet with the lid down, perfect seat, and sat down and did a drawing right there on the spot. And luckily with penguins, they're so confiding, they just stood around. Now I rearranged the bones and everything when I finally did the big painting. But that's one that immediately grabbed me. Another one that immediately grabbed me was the red-winged blackbird and the rail fence. And with the red-winged blackbird painting, I didn't know it was going to be a red-winged blackbird painting, but what got me was the rail fence. And I was driving along, going back and forth to school, and I suddenly saw this scene of the corner of my eye, and I did a double take and slammed on the brakes and backed up. And it was this incredible abstract composition right there that I knew would make a great painting sometime, and I didn't know if it was going to have any bird or anything in it or just be the rail fence.
When Robert Bateman was 12 years old, he joined the Junior Field Naturalist Club at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. Some 40 years later, a major exhibition of Robert Bateman's wildlife art was hanging in that museum. The show toured Canadian museums for 2 years and attracted hundreds of thousands of viewers.
Well, with Bateman you get both landscape and subject, and it's one thing complements the other, and it's just wonderful. You only have to look around you and see the interest of the people. They're not here just to see some well-known artist. They're really here to see Bateman's pictures.
Oh, I think it's lovely. Background is simply marvelous.
Such a thrill to see his original work because, we're mostly exposed to the prints and so much more life in the real work.
No, I just wish I owned one of them. Anyone.
I think that he's just outstanding, that he's painting,
I don't know too much about it, but he's so real, so lifelike.
I really think he's one of our finest artists in the country, and he's appreciated all across the country, I would say.
Well, I think he's a meticulous painter and knows the details. I just wonder the extent to which he uses photographs. I don't know the way in which he actually was able to transform the landscape into a painting.
If you think something as detailed as that, how much of it do you retain in your mind?
I make a lot of it up out of my mind. Like I change it around. I totally changed the silhouette because I was interested in the negative white shapes and the kind of the big abstract form. And I wanted it to look really good from about 100 feet away.
Yes.
But then I wanted it, when you get up close, I wanted it to look like an adventure in form, like you're exploring a castle. You know, you can go up and you can really understand exactly the concave or convex slopes, and you can go up and, you know, get into, it's sort of like, I guess like exploring a great big medieval castle or a whole landscape. Right. Yeah, that's right.
Quite articulate, too.
I don't know why I took a special interest in nature. It may have been just the geographical location where I grew up, which was on a ravine in Toronto, the Beltline Ravine, and the railway train went by twice a day, and there's a beautiful little creek that had pollywogs in it and great big willow trees, and it was just a fabulous world, especially during migration time. I was always quite a reader, and I remember hiking up to the library and borrowing every book in the library that had something to do with natural history. And my favorites were Ernest Thompson Seton and Charles G.D. Roberts. And of course, Ernest Thompson Seton's Two Little Savages is a classic of two little boys growing up in a bit of wilderness at the edge of a city, and it just happens that the real city in the book is Toronto. So that, all the things that he saw were things that I could see in our own ravine.
Looking at things in nature is part of the daily routine of the Bateman family. Bob, his wife Birgit, and their two boys live on the Niagara Escarpment, a strip of rugged, natural countryside in Ontario. There, every excursion into the woods is an adventure.
There may be salamanders under here. Now, don't let some come in, but look carefully. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. What's that? That's a mouse's hole, I think.
It happens that my kind of life, my interest in art and nature is kid stuff, in a sense. It's what little kids naturally like to do anyway. So I just go on with my ordinary life, looking at animals, looking at subject matter, wandering through nature, or even playing around with paints. And the kids just join in a natural, almost organic way, I guess you could say.
Can you push this one over?
Yeah, I can!
Wait a second. Want some help? Ready, steady. What do you say, timber? Timber. Timber. Wow!
The occasion is a slideshow. The subject, my life and art. The artist is enjoying it as much as the audience.
Wired, I've got one mic here. And okay, here is where we start with the painting that I think is sort of the beginning of what I do now. I did this painting for my mother for Christmas when I was 12 years old. The interesting thing about it is how much it is like what I do now. You can see, well, first of all, it's a fairly dignified animal. It's staring out of the picture, which is one thing that bothers some people with my work. I have a lot of things going out of the picture. There are several elements in the picture. It's a whole habitat. I based it on several sources, including a little picture from the National Geographic. I hadn't seen an elk at that stage. And then I lifted the background partly from the National Geographic and partly from one of the golf courses around Toronto. It's not a typical Toronto golf course, but it's...
Robert Bateman still uses pictures as source material, but for several years, he's been able to study the real animals in habitats far from the Toronto golf course.
Yellowstone National Park in the winter is one of the best places in North America for seeing wildlife, especially big game. You can be right where the animals are, and the other thing that I especially like is there aren't a lot of people. The interior of Yellowstone Park is closed in the winter to cars and all other vehicles except for snow machines. In fact, that's the only way you can get around, either by ski or snowshoe or snow machine. I haven't had the chance to see much big game from cross-country skis. I wanted to get close to the bison, and the snow was not right for walking toward them. I figured if I had to move fast, I could move a little faster in the opposite direction if they started coming toward me. But I felt quite comfortable. They seemed to be not in a particularly bad mood. They seem to be quite benign, and they're not very likely to charge unless they're in rutting season. I like the look of them. They're almost prehistoric. The big, heavy front end, and then the tight, kind of compact, muscular hind end. Seems to be from some other era.
They may be just beyond this crest.
Part of the Yellowstone Park habitat is kind of big, open range country, what you think of when you think of classical Wyoming or Montana. The only word I can think of is big country, big sky, big rolling hills. And this is the land where, if you're lucky, you'll see pronghorn or pronghorn antelopes. And we were lucky. We saw a beautiful herd of them, and it was just amazing how their colors absolutely fitted with the colors of that day, with a kind of a lustrous, sandy color, and then the little patches of white that you see on the rumps and the flanks were there in the little patches of snow. And the entire thing fitted so well, the pronghorns and the habitat and the atmosphere and the day and the big spaces and the way their eyes are geared for staring off in the great distances, looking at the big spaces. It was just a real treat with wildlife as far as I was concerned. I think the raven is a marvelous bird. It's partly because of the association, because ravens are almost universally found in wilderness country, and wilderness country is my kind of country.
Why don't you give the call?
Okay.
That's perked him up.
So I have a great association even to their calls and to seeing them. And I just like their shapes. They're kind of rugged. They're a little bit macabre, sinister. Ravens are very shy and hard to get close to, but in Yellowstone Park, they're not shot or persecuted, so I was very glad of the chance to get close to them and really observe them at close range. I guess the most important part of the painting basically is getting the idea, and that comes maybe during the several years before I actually start. Then when I come right down to doing it, I do little thumbnail sketches that just show the simple elements in it, because I strongly believe a painting should have an idea, and I don't really know how to define the word idea. It's just a simple compositional idea or thought or reason for doing it. And that shows very clearly when you make it small. Then I put it on the board. Other people say canvas, but I don't work on canvas, I work on board. In quite bold strokes that reflect the thumbnail sketch main forms. And I get back and I look at it and decide how it's going to go. And then I just start working it up. And I gradually just evolve it, alternating loose and tight and light and dark and playing with it as I go along. It's sometimes fun and it's sometimes, drudgery. And it's sometimes really frustrating. I'm just totally wallowing. In most of my paintings, I have a lot of surprises. Some of them are unpleasant surprises, and some of them I hope are pleasant surprises. This was such a wonderful setting, high up on the hill, looking down on those great steep snowy slopes with the wind-blown trees sticking out of them and so on. It was where I was seeing the ravens, but it wasn't exactly where I was seeing the ravens. But it was a gorgeous and spectacular setting, and I felt it was fitting to put that with the ravens, because that's what I associate them with.
Whether the painting is done immediately or weeks or years later, Bob relies on his visual memory, enhanced by his sketches and photographs. His childhood drawings reflect his enduring interest in birds. In those days, he sketched them in the back garden, polishing details with frequent reference to the bird books of Alan Brooks and Roger Torrey Peterson.
I think birds are the way a lot of people start into natural history, because they're easy to see, they're conspicuous. I mean, you could start in with mice if you wanted to. There may be 10 or 20 kinds of mice in this part of the world, but they only come out at night and they live under the ground in burrows, and most of them you have to kill them to identify them, and it gets kind of poignant and kind of messy. So birds are an obvious thing, and there are a lot more of them. I mean, there are 200 or 300 around here that would be theoretically possible to see.
Okay, now this was sort of the pinnacle of my Bateman the Naturalist artist in the early years, I guess you might say. I did this when I was about 18, a red-shouldered hawk at its nest, bringing in a snake. And at this time, I was starting to think of myself as an artist, not necessarily as a professional, but somebody who was interested in art. And I wanted to paint as painters painted. So I was borrowing all the books from the museum, or from the library on art. I thought if you can capture something with 3 strokes, it's way better than having to slave away with 300 strokes. This is what the Impressionists did. So I became an Impressionist. That, I think, is a nice Impressionist painting. It's a little fella. It's not fair to blow it up on the screen. It was only about 8 by 10 inches. I think I captured the quality of that place. That's the railroad tracks. And the bridge, if you know Toronto, that's Eglinton Avenue, where it goes over the railroad tracks near the top of Spadina. In those days, it's now a big cement bridge. And I spent a fantastic summer doing geology in Newfoundland. Got this little guy to pose for me, Newfoundland boy. That entire picture is, although I painted it right on the spot while the poor guy sat there freezing cold, and I didn't give him anything for it. I didn't even give him the picture, just said thanks. I did a lot of playing around, as you can see. Notice how I broke the bench he was sitting on? Actually, it's a plank. I moved it up. It doesn't go straight through. That was a straight trick from Cézanne. Another important influence on my life was the Group of 7. Remember I said I was working in Algonquin Park when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, and again when I was 21. And the idea of power and rhythm and form was very important to me. Alternating light and dark bands and building up these rhythmic paths through the picture was very important, and I still do it in my own pictures now. The point is, if you take a hunk of the world and you look at it from this point of view in terms of curves and tones and contrast and color and shape, it just opens a tremendous amount of possibilities. And that was the big impact that this looking at things from an abstract point of view had on me. Okay, this would be in the early 60s, say about 1962, and then along came Andrew Wyeth. This was a key thing in my life, as possibly some of you already know. That is not Andrew Wyeth coming along, by the way. It's a painting of perhaps his father or perhaps fate. He painted this just after his father was killed, very suddenly in a level crossing accident. And he was very depressed at the time. The painting is called The Trodden Weed.
So here was a painter who was doing abstract paintings with the real surface of the planet Earth. And the naturalist in me immediately responded, because the real surface of the planet Earth was what I was always excited by. And so I gradually moved into doing the realism and the more minute detail. I don't have any rules of composition. I believe you take all these books on how to draw and how to do perfect compositions and do the opposite or just totally ignore them, you'll get more interesting compositions. To me, there's no such thing as rules of composition anymore than there's rules of imagination. But I do have one rule, and that is I try to have nothing right on the center line, either horizontally or vertically. But if it's convenient to break the rule, I break the rule. Or sometimes I put it on the center deliberately, just because I want it to come forward like a, with a high impact.
That seems a very good, nice classic spot.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look in the mirror.
Okay.
I can't really explain the magic of a mirror in my case in helping me to see things that I wouldn't see otherwise.
Sometimes the first.
But I got the idea from portrait painting. I've painted a lot of people in my time. In fact, I've painted a few portraits for people, and you get so obsessed with looking at the picture in one way that you can't see the mistakes and the distortion and so on. And you find if you look at the thing in a mirror, it immediately becomes apparent. The two trunks come swinging down this way, and then the swing of the owl going this way, and then his gaze goes down that way. It kind of brings out all the rhythms.
Well, when you look in the mirror, it really is not looking that centered.
Mm-hmm.
It really works very well.
So I started doing that with my paintings, and I could immediately see what was wrong with the picture. Not only that, I found it's gone further than that. I can see hidden rhythms and forms that I cannot see when I'm looking at it straight on. I have to have the flip-flop image. So I do a lot of my thinking standing back by the mirror looking at it. I'll pick out the errors and I'll see new possibilities that way.
Very nice. I really like that.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's
Okay.
it.
That's it. Good.
Great.
Good boy. I've got you a little bit fierce. Is that okay? Yeah, make the eyebrows go right across. Okay. Now, nobody's supposed to know you've got real eyes. They're supposed to think these are your eyes. And finally, the little white dot. Ready? Steady. Okay, now you're going to get an orange mustache. And I've got to give you a bit of a little beard. Oh, everybody's going to be so amazed when you come to their house tonight. Hey, Soames. No, come on, you silly one. Okay. Okay, are we ready to look in almost ready to look in the mirror? Wait. That's it. Now, wait. No. You're not allowed to look till I get the hat on. I want to look at you. Let's see. Got to get it on right. Fantastic. Okay, Robbie. Can you see that guy? What do you think of him? Yeah, hold your head back and look down. That's what you have to do. No, Soames, get out. Hold your head back and you look down so people can't see you. Isn't that a weirdo? Okay, now it's your turn. Smile? No, not like that. Sinister smile. Okay, now look fierce. No. Okay, turn your head up and look at me. Look fierce. Okay, let's do the blood.
I'm your son, you need
Where's your blood? Look at me. Just a little trickle coming down. You look worse when you smile. I know who I'm not going to let into this house tonight. Dracula.
Holy smoke, there it is, roaming three continents.
Original artwork by Bateman.
Back in 1957, a friend of mine from the Royal Ontario Museum, a naturalist, Bristol Foster, gave me a call and said, how would you like to go around the world in a Land Rover? Well, I thought it was a crazy idea, but I couldn't think of any reason why not. And so we went around the world in a Land Rover. Well, there I am.
Well, you look a bit younger then.
Oh,
Not much.
a little bit skinnier.
Just a little bit.
A little bit shorter hair.
How old were you then? About 30?
No, 27.
27.
And while we were there, I was doing paintings. We were both collecting specimens. And Bristol was taking 16mm movies, which you use in an Audubon screen tour. And it's really great to take another peek at these movies, because most of the places we went, people just can't go and visit anymore. Here we are. Here are the paintings I did on the side of the rover. Toronto, Britain, Ghana, Nigeria. I tried to epitomize each place as we went through it.
Too bad I didn't keep the old Land Rover. I could have cut the side off it.
That's right.
Cut up the side and sold them as original Batemans.
We could have it hanging in the Vancouver Museum right now.
You're Cappy in the Aturi Forest where the pygmies were?
Right there, the pygmies. Isn't that super? We were there for 5 days.
That's right.
That was one of the highlights of the whole trip around the world,
for
as
sure.
I was concerned.
And we got 22 into the back of the Land Rover. Look at them climbing in.
Yeah.
And
Look at it pushing more in.
There's the
That's
net
right.
going in. They're taking us hunting with their nets.
Couldn't repeat.
4 in the front tire, and there still was 1 left over. Remember? And he went on the roof.
Yeah.
And that was 30 of us in or on the Land Rover.
And the fantastic singing.
Yeah. Beautiful singing.
Yeah. I memorized a song.
Hey, Kumanjaw, boy, boy,
Boy,
boy,
boy.
Aruba.
Hey,
Kumanjaw,
Wait,
boy.
we got to do it as a round. Ah, Kumanda, boy, boy,
Hey,
boy.
Kumanjaw, boy,
Kumanda.
boy, a boy, Aruba.
Ah,
Hey,
Kumanda,
boy,
boy, boy. Anyway, it was
very memorable.
And you know, the thing, what I really liked about it especially was the words were typical pygmy philosophy. Everything is great, the forest is fabulous, and everything is going really well.
Yeah.
All of their songs are really hymns of praise.
Very positive people.
That's right. There's a saying that once you've been to Africa, you'll always return. And after my first trip to Africa with Bristol in 1957, I knew I was going to come back again to East Africa. It is just one of the most wonderful places in the whole world. Then, of course, I taught in Nigeria for a couple of years, and my first son, Alan, was born in Nigeria. And from that time on, I made a kind of a mental vow that one day I'm going to take Alan and some of the other kids to Africa. And I saved for it and planned for it and postponed it a year or two, and finally this summer we actually did it.
Across the Ngobop Laga and head across to what we call the sort of Lagaya Bila Shaka, which means we always find lions in that region. Those lions don't seem to move too much, sir.
Look at the way she's looking up at you.
What a face, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Watch, Christopher. Watch how she gets hold of that. Look how she's holding on. Wow. Isn't that exciting? You'll be able to describe it back home.
Does that make you hungry, Christopher? Do you like a little bit of meat right now? I don't look upon going to exotic parts of the world as being of any importance to my art. It's important to me as a person. I sort of consider myself an enjoyer of the planet Earth, and I like to savor neat chunks of it, and of course East Africa is one of the most choice bits. So if I go and I enjoy it and I savor it, I get inspired by certain things in it. But it hasn't had any impact or effect on the trend or direction or anything. It's simply subject matter, and it could be a couple of lions in some grass, or it could be Ontario with a killdeer flying over grass. It hasn't had any important effect on that, only subject matter. The period of my life when I was living in Africa happened to coincide with the time when I started working as a realist artist, and I was doing African wildlife subjects and selling them in Nairobi and getting a name as an international wildlife artist while I was a school teacher partly in Nigeria and then back at home in Burlington.
For 10 years, Robert Bateman divided his time between teaching and painting. After some sellout shows, he decided to try painting full-time. Today, he has an international waiting list of collectors who want a Bateman original.
My materials are just the most ordinary, down-to-earth kind of materials that you could buy in any store. And I'm sorry to say they don't cost very much. I don't know how much I would spend on a big painting in materials. I guess $3.49 or something like that, probably. It would be a masonite base, and then acrylic gesso, and then acrylic on top. And then I usually finish about a third of my paintings with oils that I put right on top of the acrylics. And I work very, very thin, sort of in the, I guess, the same manner that Vermeer worked, layer after layer, sort of alternating transparent and opaque. A famous master teacher of the past told one of his students, in order to learn how to draw, you have to make at least 2,000 mistakes. Get busy and start making them. And this has always been my philosophy. I just start right in on it. And I never know what D is going to be until I've done A, B, C. And then once I do D, then that may affect A. So I have to change A, which affects B, and so on and so on. So it's going up, moving along gradually like this. Well, almost every picture has had major changes in it. One classic one is the flying bald eagle, Majesty on the wing. And I think the head I finally ended up with is the fourth head. And the other heads were finished. I mean, polished right up with a little highlight in the eye and, you know, the beak and the shadow and the nostril and all that kind of thing. And I didn't like them. And I don't like them till they're finished, because they may not look right because they're not finished. So I have to finish them, and then it turns out I lost on that one. This is a fairly famous painting. Some of you may recognize it. Others may not have seen it yet. And I just thought I'd show it. Those of you who are curious, I'd show it to you. This is the one I did for Princess Grace. The circumstances were there was a big conference in Monaco for game conservation. And I was asked to have a show of my prints. And the royal family were the patrons of the show. And I thought it would be nice if I did a painting for Princess Grace. So I did a bit of research into what kind of things she liked. I found out she really was crazy about flowers. So I decided to make a flower the main element in the painting. Then I wanted to pick a bird that could be both found in Europe and found in Philadelphia, which is where Grace Kelly came from. So I picked the golden-crowned kinglet, which is called a firecrest over in Europe. And this is the end result. It's a tiny painting. It's not much bigger than 8 by 10. It was a fantastic experience for Birgit and I to be able to present it to her. Well, it's kind of like, this sounds corny and everything, but it was sort of like an angel walked into the room. She was just so gorgeous and immaculate, and she was wearing an ultra suede suit, just the color of the rhododendrons there. This is another fairly famous one that hasn't been published. This is the one that was done for Prince Charles. People keep saying it was one of the wedding gifts Canada gave to Prince Charles and Lady Diana. I guess I'm a bit of a ham or whatever. What I want is, that's not exactly right. It was the only wedding gift Canada gave to Prince Charles. This is not Lady Diana's. It's only Prince Charles. If they ever split up, he gets it. And it was the only gift that Canada gave. And the Governor General asked me to do it. He asked also if I would do loons. So here's a pair of common loons and 2 babies, as you can probably see, up in northern Ontario in Killarney Park. And I hope you can see that that is essentially an abstract painting too, in many ways. Very flat, like an abstract. I guess I've been working on this painting for, 3 or 4 months now. And this one has stayed more or less the way it started. I think I jiggled the owl around a little bit. I might have made it a wee bit bigger. One thing that happened while I was working on this is really a delight to me when this kind of thing takes place, was that I began to see things happening in the picture, and it occurred to me that the entire composition was kind of an allegory or an echo or a parallel to the owl's head. A great gray owl has a head more than any other owl composed of 2 big dishes with radiating form coming out of the center piece. And I saw the whole thing, the entire painting, developing into a great gray owl's head. And the interesting thing is the the head of the bird is actually in the exact spot where the eye would be if this was the owl's face. And right now, I'm putting white down in this area here. To me, it's just a thought paralleling the little white beard or beards that the great gray has. And it, I think, will help to carry a kind of a swooping motion. Even though it's a very static, quiet picture, I think the whole thing has a swooping sort of quality to it, and that's what I'm emphasizing right now by picking up little bits of white sky coming through here. And the idea, in other words, the abstract ideas for the painting came from the abstract composition of the bird itself. Something else I intend to do just about at the end, and this would horrify a lot of people, I intend to give the entire picture a coating of white. I'm going to get some thin white paint with a little bit of acrylic varnish. I'm going to make the whole thing flat. I'm going to pour it on. And it's a bit of a gamble. And I might partially blow it out. I don't think so, because I've been giving it coatings of white in between times. And it will just make the whole thing very, very delicate and quite flat. And that's the effect I want. Well, there goes. I don't want this to have a lot of impact. I want it to look ghostly, because great gray owls are like ghosts. They're quiet and they're ephemeral and they move silently through the forest, and that's the effect I want. And I don't know, this may be carrying it too far, but I think of some of the lovely paintings of Whistler, where he has just white and white on white, and they're very high key, or maybe some of Turner's things. Not that I think I'm in their league, but maybe there's a bit of Whistler influence in this. Sometimes it takes me 2 years to finish something, but I never work on any one thing steadily. I would sort of leapfrog along. I would guess I would do about 10 proper pictures, fairly major important ones a year. And I would do a few other small ones in addition to that. Well, people in the last couple of years have come up to me, and some people have said, oh, I'm so happy for your success, or how are you handling your success? This word sort of seemed to be a problem to me. It didn't seem to fit somehow, until I finally realized what was wrong was they were talking about fame. It's not what I mean by success. Since my goal has never been to be famous, I can't see that I would say now that I'm a bit famous, therefore I'm successful. Success to me is how well I do each picture. And, I have all kinds of struggles, and I go through a tremendous amount in working on each picture. And I hope that the picture turns out really well, and I feel good about it, and my peers feel good about it, people who I respect. That's what I mean by success. Now, the fame part is something else. I have to admit it seems to be there in some ways, and it's neither good or bad. It's like the weather. It has drawbacks and it has advantages. Drawbacks are my time keeps getting gobbled up, and I have to get a lot more protective and defensive about my time.
The Art of Robert Bateman was published in 1981 and sold out almost immediately. The book is now in a third edition. Its success put additional pressures on the artist, who estimates that he has signed about 30,000 of the 100,000 copies in print. Time continues to be a problem, but the public contact enlivens Bateman's life and frequently expands it.
Well, one of the doors that this kind of recognition has opened to me was the trip to the Queen Charlotte's. And there, out of the blue, in a book signing, someone came and asked me if I would come as a resource person to the Queen Charlotte's and talk about art and nature with a small group of people. So that's what Birgit and I did, and it was fabulous.
Well, I want a little fog.
A little bit of
So
fog.
if you can work on
24
that.
hours or so at least.
Just give us 24 hours notice.
Okay, great.
We'll have it set up for you. So we've got a few more people in the other plane, all right?
The Queen Charlotte's are a perfect place for an artist, or a photographer for that matter. But an artist is always looking for rhythmic forms and shapes and sort of strong, powerful images. And you've got them there. You've got verticals, you've got horizontals, you've got the rock outcrop, you've got the driftwood, tremendous piles of driftwood, the great giant trees, the dead snags, then you've got the rhythm of the waves. Everything there is almost a ready-made picture, and it's almost enough exaggerated on its own that you don't have to do anything with it. I'm going to try to get everybody, even the unconfident ones, to draw, and I'm going to go on the assumption that you want to learn something. Having been a high school teacher for 20 years, I have all kinds of opinions, things that I like to get across, but I haven't taught since 1976, so I've got this all bottled up inside me, and you're in for it. See the light coming on the top of these bones? These bones are the driftwood right here. You should be able to do, let's face it, bones are more interesting than driftwood, slightly. This driftwood is a little blob-like, a little bit like sausages, with all due respect. But nevertheless, you could see how the form of the bones is shown by the light, going from light to dark. Now, I have a good example of cropping back here in the rhinoceros. Find it. There it is. Now this looks as if I've cut the picture off by mistake. Here I cut it off, and you talk about vignetting. This is definitely not vignetted. The end of the horn goes off, the ears go off, and the body goes off there, and that's exactly how I wanted it. It's painted about life size, about from there to there. And what I really liked was the negative shapes. I don't know if you agree that's a nice shape. Mm-hmm. It's, oh great. Chick agrees it's a nice shape, and I respect his opinion. And this is quite a nice shape here, too. And that I created that shape. I moved his leg around and so on, so that shape would work. I created this little tick bird here out of plasticine, because it needed something there, somehow, to draw your eye away from all this concentration. Mm-hmm. I was told that I was making a big marketing mistake by cutting off the horn. I said, nobody will buy a rhinoceros with his horn cut off. And of course, that's the least of my worries. I wanted to cut the horn off. Didn't matter whether anybody would buy it.
Did somebody buy it?
Oh, yes. It turned out that this was the most popular painting in the entire show with the artists who went to look at the show. Makes me think of a Henry Moore, maybe, a piece of sculpture. Cruising around in the Zodiacs or whatever inflatable boats they were is always just a fantastic treat. And you can go right in close to the shore. And the shore of the west coast, the rocky shore, is just wonderful with all of the floating kelp. Quite a few different species of kelp, but what I like the best, I think, are the bull kelp. And they have these lovely translucent fronds coming out with them with the light all glowing through them. And then to have added to that a seal playing around in amongst the kelp and sort of slithering by, and its head is sort of the same rounded shape as the kelp. And it's got the same kind of languid movements. It's just one of these images that you never forget. Well, the Queen Charlottes are really special in Canada, in a sense in the whole world, because they're the seat of this great culture, the Haida culture. And there are still remnants of this great culture that are very important and very impressive, the totem poles and some of the village sites. It's a wonderful, almost unspoiled, untouched nature paradise. The opportunity to sketch totem poles on location where the people that made them put them and worshipped them and had their ceremony is something that very, very few people in the entire world have ever had the chance to do. Emily Carr was one, maybe one of the greatest Canadian artists. And we are able to do it ourselves. And it's not the kind of thing that you may even be able to do in the future. This is just an incredible privilege to be able to be here. I usually pipe dream about a picture often for years after having seen it. And in thinking that over, I think probably the totem poles, for sure. I want something that has a feeling of solitude, of a kind of a spiritual, almost old cathedral feeling to it. There'll be the strong verticals, there'll be the awareness of texture. And then I want to put some little form of life in it, and I'm quite sure now that it'll be a hermit thrush. Because to me, a hermit thrush also symbolizes solitude. When you hear a hermit thrush singing, it sounds like it's in a cathedral. Also, it does have a special meaning to the Haida. And it's one of the common birds that lives in that big, damp forest. I have a theory that we live in the most important part of the history of the planet Earth. The 5 decades between the year 1950 and the year 2000 are going to see more phenomena disappear than have ever disappeared for any equivalent time before, or will disappear in the future, say after the year 2000 or maybe 2030. Now, by things, I mean all the things that make up our natural heritage or our human heritage. These could be ways of life of people, they could be plant and animal communities, species of plants and animals. Evidently, at the present time, there is one species becoming extinct every week, and if the present trends continue, one species will become extinct every day by the end of the 1980s. That's in about, just a few years from now. So we're the ones that are kind of in charge. I feel that we in our society are the aristocrats of history and geography of, the whole picture of the planet. At the present time, I'm so concerned about all of this extinction that's going on, because it's very permanent, that I'm an avid preservationist. I'm not just a conservationist, I'm a preservationist. I consider all corners of the planet Earth, whether it's the oceans or the atmosphere or Tibet or the Antarctic, something that I should be very concerned about, and I kind of go around, give talks, and show through my painting aspects of these exciting parts of the planet Earth, in the hopes that maybe people sit up and take notice and try to hang on to them too. I can't conceive of not painting or drawing. I just paint or draw because I want to do it. It has nothing whatever to do with whether they would sell or not. I didn't sell anything until I was about 35. Anything properly, just the odd little one for a wedding gift or something like that. I gave away most things. And I'll keep on painting as long as I have my eyes and as long as I have my arms and so on. And of course, I'm never going to retire or anything like that. I'm just going to keep on doing it.